Okay. All right, thank you all for coming today. Appreciate you being here. My name is Joel French. I'm the Executive Director of Public Interest Alberta, and we've got quite a crowd behind me, obviously, so I'm going to do a quick introduction of everybody present so that you know who that we've got. We have, maybe just wave when I say your name, Kathy Hogue, President of Public School Boards Association of Alberta, Greg Jeffrey, the President of the Alberta Teachers Association, Bridget Sterling, the Vice Chair of the Edmonton Public School Board, Duncan Kinney, Executive Director of Progress Alberta, Carolyn Blassetti, Executive Director of Support Our Students Alberta, Perry Garvin, Executive Council Member with the Edmonton and District Labour Council, Greg Carabine, President of Edmonton Catholic Teachers, Heather Quinn, President of Edmonton Public Teachers, Marley Roberts, President of CUPE Alberta, Leanne LaRocque, Chair of the Canadian Union of Public Employees Alberta Education Employees Committee, Bob Anderson, representing various staff at the Calgary Board of Education as Vice President of CUPE Local 40, John Vredenberg, representing custodial staff at Edmonton Public Schools as President of CUPE Local 474, Leanne Kalin, representing support staff at St. Albert Public Schools as President of CUPE Local 1099, Carol Chapman, representing support staff at Edmonton Public Schools as President of CUPE Local 3550, and Debbie Thomas, representing support staff at Sturgeon Public Schools as an executive member with CUPE Local 4625. Did I miss anybody? All right, terrific. So to get started today, we're gathered I should also mention we have two organizations who are supportive but were unable to be present today, the Calgary and District Labour Council and the Calgary Board of Education Staff Association. As well as, Unifor Local 52A that represents support staff at Edmonton Catholic Schools. So we're here today, the 17 of us organizations, to make a specific proposal to the provincial government in the lead up to the March 22nd provincial budget. Our proposal is as follows, and you'll see it in text form to my right here. That in Budget 18, that the provincial government reduce public funding to private schools from 70% to 50%, with the exception of special needs schools, and then to reallocate the approximately $30 million in savings from that move to fund a classroom conditions improvement project in select public, Catholic, and Francophone schools. And so I've got 5 speakers that I've introduced here that are going to speak a little bit to why their organizations are supporting this proposal and why the proposal is important for Alberta. So I'm going to start off with Carolyn Blassetti, the Executive Director of Support Our Students Alberta. Carolyn.
Thanks, Joel. I guess I'm going first here. Didn't know that. So our inspiration for today is a quote from Sonia Sotomayor, the Associate Justice for the Supreme Court of the United States. And she says, "Until we get equality in education, we won't have an equal society." Our vision for public education in Alberta is one where every child has the right to an equitable, accessible, and comprehensive education that is free from discrimination or financial burden. Private education will always appeal to some Albertans, but it is not the responsibility of the government to fund personal choice to leave the public system, particularly when funding of the public system is diluted as a result. Recently, we contributed to the 2018 winter edition of Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives education magazine, Our Schools Ourselves. We wrote about the impact of education policy in Alberta over the past 30 years, and our conclusion states, "Public education is a fundamental human right every child deserves. When we marketize it, we do a disservice to our most marginalized students and society at large." The good news is we do not have to buy into the marketing. We're not obligated to support this narrative. Albertans can change this. We can consistently elect legislators who are committed to public education and can reverse the damage done through decades of deliberate underfunding so that every child has an equitable chance to a great education. We can equitably fund a universal public education system that serves every child in every community. Universal public education is meant to engage children equally, instill a love of learning, and create numerate and literate citizens, but not at the exclusion of creating engaged, diverse, resilient citizens who can think critically, work collaboratively, and develop strong relationships. The promise of public education should be to lay the groundwork for a society we wish to live in, where all our children can thrive. It is this ethical, social, and democratic obligation to the common public good that we stand in support of Public Interest Alberta's call to reduce private school funding and redirect those funds to public schools, an initiative rooted in the principle that public funds are for public use. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Marley Roberts and
Oh yeah, move that down.
QP Alberta. Good morning, Marley Roberts with QP Alberta. QP represents approximately just shy of 10,000 members who work in public and Catholic school districts across the province. We have custodial workers, administrative workers, educational assistants who work with special needs students. Our members through the years have seen education funding go up and down, and they have also seen firsthand the effects of underfunding. Limited funding for support staff in our increasingly complex public school classrooms means many students are not getting the attention they need to succeed at school, and that is shameful. Every dollar that goes to an elite private school is a dollar taken away from the public schools that are open to all Albertans for a fair, equitable education. Our members tell me every day that they are there to help students succeed, from making sure that the classrooms are clean and safe, to making sure that they get the quality education, the students get quality education that they need. We owe it to the students to do the same when it comes to funding. If a student has special needs, they should be given the tools that they need to succeed. That helps them succeed down the road in society. It shouldn't depend on the salary of the parents. So we are here today in support of Public Interest Alberta and to send the message to the government. We need more funding in public schools. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Kathy Hall from the Public School Boards Association of Alberta. Thank you for allowing us to participate in this important work. The Public School Boards Association of Alberta believes in choice. However, it is choice within the public education system where all of our children learn and live the values of democracy together, reflecting our hope and shaping the future for Alberta. We often hear people speak of the value of and the need for choice within education. The reality for our children is that choice for one child often results in the loss of choice for others. Parents can have the right to choose an alternative, elite private education for their children. However, we believe they should pay for that choice themselves. And at the end of the day, is it the parent that has the choice, or is it the school who chooses who they will accept? Parents also have the right to ask, what is the standard for education in this province? The standard for education in Alberta is not set by elite private schools. It is set, modeled, and celebrated by Alberta's public schools. We believe that Albertans want their children educated in a public school where every child is afforded the greatest learning opportunities within a safe and inclusive environment. Alberta students have ambitions to be the best engineers, business person, tradesperson, teacher, doctor, nurse, or whatever it is they aspire to be. Public schools are designed to deliver this expectation, and we need to collectively ensure that public funds are in place to enable Alberta's children to achieve their ambitions and their dreams. Alberta provides wonderful learning opportunities for every one of our children through our public education system. Access to these programs is the social contract, which is the heart of our democracy, our communities, and our province. We believe in and share Albertans' commitment to this social contract. Public funding for elite private schools that also charge tuition to parents is not part of the social contract. The financial pressure on education is such now that it is the time to decide where our tax dollars should be allocated. Should they be allocated to our public education system where all children are served, or to elite private schools that serve a limited and exclusive group? The answer is simple. Splintering resources for our children by removing dollars from our public education system is not acceptable. Public funds must be allocated to our public education system to provide much needed resources for our children. Alberta's children need an inclusive place where their uniqueness is an advantage, where they learn about each other on an equal basis and can celebrate the diversity that makes Alberta what it is today. Alberta's public education system is that place. We welcome every child, celebrate diversity, and value individual differences. Alberta's public education system offers within one system choice that reflects and is responsive to the beautiful diversity of our students and the communities that we serve. Alberta's public education system is a cooperative system of democracy where every child, regardless of where they live in Alberta, deserves equitable access. As leaders from across Alberta and within our communities, we proudly stand shoulder to shoulder together on behalf of Alberta's children and united in our support of Alberta's public education system. The Alberta government needs to demonstrate that our children are at the heart of all decisions. It is time for our government to take this first important step by reducing public funding of private schools from 70% to 50%. It is the position of PSBAA, however, that there should be zero funding of private schools. 50% though is a step in the right direction, but not ultimately where we hope to land. It is time for our government to stand with us and with our children. Public dollars should be directed back to Alberta's public schools, back to our public schools where each child has many opportunities to realize their dreams. Alberta's children are watching and they are counting on us. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Greg Jeffrey and I am proud to be the president of the Alberta Teachers Association. First of all, I'd like to thank Public Interest Alberta for inviting Alberta teachers to be a part of this very important event this morning. I'll give you a little bit of background and some numbers. Alberta's public education system, which includes public, separate, and Francophone boards, it's first of all globally recognized for excellence and equity. In Alberta, 93% of students attend school in one of these three public systems. As teachers, we believe public dollars should go to public education, ensuring that every student has a fair and equal opportunity to succeed. By focusing public funding on public schools, we ensure that the strength of our education system is sustained and that the benefits of public funding go furthest to help the students who need it the most. Learning in Alberta's public, separate, and Francophone schools is hindered by class sizes that are larger than they should be and by under-supported inclusion of students with special needs. At the same time, some private schools are boasting about their exceptionally low class sizes while refusing to even accept students who have special needs. It is fundamentally unfair that these private schools with low class sizes and no inclusion of special needs are charging $10,000 to $15,000 per year in tuition while also receiving a generous public subsidy. Public education is free and accessible to all students, and Albertans agree that those factors should determine who gets public funding. With limited public funding available, teachers believe that the government should prioritize funding to enhance public education over subsidies for private schools. Some suggest that the public funding provided to private schools is saving the government money. This is truly a myth. This so-called savings only exists if those private school students switch to public schools because of a change in funding. There is much strong evidence to suggest that that will not happen. In Alberta, we fund private schools more than any other province. We offer 70% funding. Quebec offers 60%, and 3 other provinces provide 50%. 5 provinces in Canada do not provide any funding to public schools at all. When given these facts, our public opinion polling shows that 3 in 5 Albertans feel that Alberta provides too much funding for public schools.
Private schools.
Private schools. Did I say too much funding? I will tender my resignation. Here's an example. Should we allocate it to Rundle College, which charges students $15,000 a year in tuition, accepts only students with high marks on admission tests, and boasts small class sizes of 14 to 15 students? Or should we allocate it to Buchanan School, which accepts all students regardless of their economic or academic ability, where a third of students are learning to speak English, where a quarter of students have special needs, and where some students only have school supplies, bikes, or lunches because of various community supports? Our province's present funding model chooses to send that $7 million each year to Rundle College instead of Buchanan. It is the wrong choice in my mind. As teachers, we see the importance and value of having students from diverse backgrounds learning together, not just learning content outcomes, but learning how to work together, to embrace diversity, and to become good global citizens. We believe in a strong, healthy, well-supported public education system because, here in Alberta, public education works.
Thank you. Good morning. Bridget Sterling, Vice Chair of Edmonton Public School Board. I am pleased to be here today to represent my colleagues on the Edmonton Public School Board and to call on the provincial government to reduce private school funding and reinvest in public education. At our February 20th board meeting, our trustees passed the following motion: that the Edmonton Public School Board of Trustees continue its strong commitment to public education and advocate the provincial government begin phasing out public funding of private schools and reinvest that money in public classrooms. As a board, we champion values of inclusivity and accessibility, the basic tenets of public education. Currently, more than $100 million of taxpayer funds are spent annually to subsidize the cost of private school education in Alberta. For every private school student in this province, the government pays 70% of what a public student receives, the highest percentage of any jurisdiction in the country. Rolling back that funding to 50%, with the exception of schools that support students with special needs, would allow the provincial government to reallocate that $30 million into classroom improvement. This is money that should be spent and needs to be reinvested to improve public classrooms and public education in our province. It is important that public dollars are invested wisely, especially as the government states that it is facing budgetary constraints. The expenditure of those dollars should be focused on core public services, including public education. Public education is meant to be inclusive and accessible for everyone. The notion of accessibility is absent from the private school model. Private schools can and do pick and choose their students and set their tuition rates. Public funding should belong to schools that use it to educate the public, all of us, no matter our backgrounds or our income. Private schools have every right to exist in Alberta and provide choice to some parents, students, and families. Phasing out the funding of private schools does not remove choice for families. Rather, the choice remains. Pay the higher tuition fee to cover the cost left when the government reduces funding to private schools, or send your child to a public school. It is also important to note that there are those who think that we should support equal funding of private and public education. Equally funding the private and the public schools will seriously erode and compromise the public education system in a way that will have far-reaching impacts on our children and our society. While in opposition, this government raised concerns about the way the province funded private schools. Now they have formed government. We ask them to commit to changing the private school funding model in Alberta to support inclusive and accessible public education. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Now we'll take some questions. We can take a few as a group if we want to first, and then we can certainly do some one-on-one interviews after that. Do you prefer to do any questions as a group, or you want to just do one-on-ones? Okay, we can take a few now if you like.
Okay, I have a question about the $30 million value. So
Sure.
total education ministry funding last year was $8.2 billion. $30 million is 0.36% of that. How much of a tangible difference would redirecting $30 million make?
That's a good question. Certainly in the grand scheme of things, it may not seem like a lot, but when we actually talk about $30 million and talk about what it could do, granted it wouldn't be enough to improve classroom conditions in every classroom in the province. That's why we're saying for now it has to be an amount that is going to be allocated in select schools. And that's really to demonstrate that the kind of impact that it would have if the government actually did have the money or did make the money available to improve classroom conditions in classrooms across the province. So it is something that we believe needs to happen everywhere. $30 million is enough to at least show the positive effects that it would have. And then, we believe that would strongly make the case really to Albertans and to everybody in the legislature that this is something that actually needs to be fully funded.
Further to that, Joel, the $30 million represents, the $30 million represents 40% of the $75 million that was allocated to the Classroom Improvement Fund. So in that sense, I believe it is a significant amount of money, and certainly it could have been accessed very well by the public system as part of, let's say, the Classroom Improvement Fund or other initiatives.
So how do you want the $30 million spent? I might need to hear from multiple people on that one, but.
Yeah, I think the details of that would certainly be something the government needs to decide, but we believe that it has to be supporting some classrooms in public Catholic and Francophone systems in the places where the needs are the greatest. And so, I think the government has a good sense of where that is, but particularly where class sizes are very large, and particularly where we have students that have very high needs. The phrase unsupported inclusion was used a couple of times in the initial comments, and that's what's happening in a lot of these classrooms is children with complex needs are in classrooms, but the class sizes are too large and there aren't enough staff in order to care for those needs and ensure that every child has the ability to develop their full potential.
Yes, and I'm going to talk specifically to the $30 million and what that could do. And it is a significant amount. It's a significant amount when you see the cuts that have happened over the years for the educational assistants. And we've seen with inclusion, we have seen special needs students who had a full-time educational assistant with them cut to half-time. We have seen maintenance in the schools being privatized, and with that going outside, privatization, we have seen schools not being maintained in a quick fashion. And I'll just use a few examples. I mean, the order has to go into Toronto, which comes back to the schools, and the timeliness of getting the repairs done is significant. That $30 million will go a long way in regards to the support staff on the ground, working with the students and helping the students get a quality education. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a significant amount when it comes to the students who the money should go towards. Thanks.
Hi, Janet. I did some quick number crunching, and based on Government of Alberta numbers, $30 million would get you roughly 7 school modernizations, or the average cost of a new school or a school modernization is $4.2 million. So that's 7.
So you'd rather see it go to capital funding?
Well, I'm just giving you some options here of what that $30 million could go to. It could get you 120 new playgrounds, and the rough number that I got from from ATAs, you could hire around 300 new teachers for $30 million.
Sorry, can you just repeat your name?
Oh, sorry, I'm Duncan Kinney with Progress Alberta.
Thank you. From what I hear, there shall be no public dollars invested in private schools. So how did you came up with the number of 50% of subsidy for private schools?
Sure. About a year ago, many of these same organizations made a proposal that over 3 years we were calling on the government to phase out the funding. So really this is staying consistent with our proposal of phasing it out. And 70% is a lot of money, and that's why we're doing this today. And so we think it's a fair compromise to those who are using those subsidies now to see that phased out over a period of time. So we proposed 3 years. We are still proposing 3 years, and 20% will be the start of that. If the government wants to do more than that, that's terrific too. I think all of us present want to see public funding of private schools actually reduced to zero, but this is a compromise we're making to say, do this a little bit gradually, and we can make this happen over time.
Thank you.
Just have a follow-up question for Greg. So you're talking about how often the counter argument is, hey, you guys, private schools save money. You only have to pay 0.7 of what you pay for every public student, and the parents pitch in the rest. So you're saying that that's a myth, and there's much strong evidence to suggest that it will not happen, that kids will mass move back to public school. What is this evidence? How do you know?
Well, first of all, the savings, and I haven't crunched the exact numbers, but would only be occurring if every one of those private school students returned to the public system. We saw evidence of this in another province, and I'm not recalling which province it was. Ontario took their, there we go, I have friends. Ontario reduced their private school funding back to zero, and certainly the private school system did not cease to exist in the province of Ontario. Many are involved in the private school system for all sorts of reasons that they would not give up just because of cost.
Sure, yeah.
I'd just like to add to that actually the numbers of private schools in Ontario actually increased. And so I think that dispels the myth that reduced funding would see a mass exodus back to the public system. They're thriving in Ontario with 0% funding from tax dollars.
I've got one additional bit to add to that as well from Ontario, is that the rate of students attending private schools in Ontario is 5.5%. So 5.5% of all students in Ontario attend private schools. In Alberta, that number is 4.4%. So we actually, even though we provide 70% funding, public funding for private schools, our rate of attendance at private schools is actually lower than a province that funds at an amount of 0.
So what about charter schools? Nobody's talking about charter schools.
Charter schools are not part of our proposal today. They're a very different situation. Public Interest Alberta has talked about that before, but it's not something that's part of this proposal. Charter schools, of course, are funded at 100% of operating funding, and they are a model that we believe needs change as well, but it's a very different change than what we're talking about with private schools.
Okay, indulge me. What kind of
Sure.
model, what kind of change do you think?
So I'm speaking just for Public Interest Alberta here, and others may agree or may not agree, that charter schools really operate independently of elected and accountable school boards. And to the extent that they're providing or that they want to become public schools and fit the criteria for becoming public schools, they could be transitioned into something like that. Many of them may want to become private schools if they are given the option of becoming public schools or private schools. The status quo does not work. It's a very small number of schools. It's 13 schools in the province. So ultimately that's, again, not what we're focused on here today. But really Public Interest Alberta's position is they should be given the option of either becoming private schools and not receiving the public funding, or if they fit the criteria and they want to become public schools, then that could happen, and subject, of course, to school boards wanting them and feeling like they're going to be a good fit. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that.
I do have some more context for you on evidence if you want.
Any other questions, or we can do one-on-ones too if we want to do that. Okay, we'll wrap this up for now, and let us know who you want to talk to, or approach whoever you like, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good.